Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle from WeAreSC.com. We're in fall camp. I mean, not the four of us, but USC is in fall camp, and we get to see some of it, and we get to talk about it. We're going to do that today. Talk a little bit about fall camp, what we've learned, what we think is going on. We'll talk a little bit about the next game on our weekly preview, which is the one everybody's been wanting to talk about, Northwestern at USC. And maybe we'll talk some coaches preseason poll. You know how carefully those coaches study all of the other teams in the country in order to get that poll right. And who knows? Who knows what might happen? Guys, it's almost we almost have a full week of fall camp in the books, right? Pretty close. And thanks to Coach Riley, you guys have actually been able to watch some of it. Granted, the players have not been in full pads, and there are some limitations on what exactly you can say you saw, but we know some stuff. We know some stuff. At least Mark and Eric know some stuff. I don't know any stuff because I've been in Dallas and I haven't seen a single thing. So let's see what you guys have to say. Mark, let's start with you. Give me your big picture thoughts. What, if anything, have we learned so far in the first week of fall camp?
If we've learned one thing, this team is going to be ultra competitive. The thing that really stood out to me the most is even the true freshmen. There is zero back down. I'm not saying they're disrespectful, but they feel that this is their place. They should be here. There was one drill we watched. Again, I won't talk about the individual players going up against each other, but there was one true freshman that just stood there pretty stoic. Like, you know what? I beat you in this rep. What are you going to do about it? And the veteran was like chirping. He kind of felt it. There's so much competition going on right now between the position groups, especially between the offense and defense, that if you lose a rep, the other side is going to let you know. I mean, they're trying to bring out the best in everybody. I love the condition these guys look like they're in. They're bigger, they're stronger. I know this is all cliche, but there's also some more, how do I put this? It's more rigid, a little bit more keeping everything close, tight during the conditioning drill. You know, in the past, it was just a bunch of guys. It looked like, you know, if you're using last year, the year before, I would describe it as the skip and stretch, where a lot of guys are just, you know, kind of just going through the motions. This reminds me more, and I think Eric used the analogy, it looks more like a Chris Carlisle type of conditioning group. A lot of stretching, a lot of unison going on, a lot of clapping in a transition, going to the next exercise. What I like is everybody seems to be really focused right now. And again, you mentioned it, Chris. They've had 5 practices so far. Shoulder pads are on, but the first day they put those shoulder pads on, you know, they were getting after it. And in fact, the coaches had to separate them a little bit. So I like that. The spirit of competition is up right now. They're excited. And I think starting next week, you know, as we get into the second week of practices, that's when we'll be able to make a determination. All right, this is who's going to be in the rotation. This is who's not. Give us a really good idea what this team could look like.
Couple interesting things there. It seems to me that there has been a focus, at least in terms of the talking and hopefully in terms of the doing, on discipline and attention to the details, which I don't know that there's ever been a great football coach who wasn't a stickler for doing things just right. Yes, Greg Katz, that's true, right? If you're a great football coach, it's because you insist that people do things exactly right over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's right. And you insist that the coaches that you have are basically a mirror of the head coach in terms of getting it right, because the players will all see that progression of the head coach and the assistant coaches. I can tell you, based on watching these assistant coaches, they're very intense. I think they all realize they're USC. I think they all realize that this is a season that they need to make sure everything is right, because everybody that watches this team, you know, you can only hide so much from the media. You really can't, because you can't hide anything once the games are being played. And if there's all sorts of penalties and mess ups on this, that, and the other thing, everybody's going to know about it. The fans in the stands, they're going to talk about it. You have to be ready to go in all phases, especially this year, because to be honest with you, from my perspective, this is a big year for Lincoln Riley. He cannot afford another team that's okay. They've got to show some real progress. Are they going to make the playoffs? Who knows?
Yeah, no, I agree with that in large part because this is a USC roster that really should be better than 6 or 7 wins. And so it's one thing, it's one thing if you're struggling and you look out on the field and you're just playing against teams that have better players. I don't think many of the teams on USC's schedule actually have better players this year. So we'll see. Eric, this bit about
Hang on, Chris, because I know you're gonna ask me a good question, but I want to finish something that Mark said. Uh, One of the things again during the open part where we're able to watch and they go into stretching because it does look different with True Carroll kind of running things. And does doing this one stretch instead of that one stretch mean you win 2 extra games this year? No. But one of the things that really stood out was they all get in kind of that grid formation when they're doing stretches. True Carroll's walking up and down the middle, and he stops and points to a player in like the back row far away, and the player reaches down and moves his helmet back like 6 inches to where it should go. Like, again, does that one thing win a game or change a program? No, but a million of those things can, right? And if every single thing looks like that, then you're a different program, a different team going forward. So that was one thing. Again, it's so small, but that combined with the story that you heard about their first get together, where he's got a whole workout planned and they never even get to it because they spent so much time doing the warm up. And no, it doesn't look like that. It looks like this. This is how we do it. This is how we do those things. And again, you heard about this kind of change in culture, whatever gets thrown around so much, but just that attention to detail and like Lincoln Riley said, just a new voice. It's not a 180 degrees in terms of, now we don't do any of this anymore. Now we do this type of stuff. Like all these strength and conditioning coaches, they all kind of go to the same things and share the same, strategies and whatever. But when you hear it from a different person in a different way, it can mean a lot. And I think just when you're talking strength and conditioning and what they did this offseason once True Carroll got there, I think it's been significant. So again, that's kind of not X's and O's, that sort of thing, but I think it does change how you go into the season, the focus, all of that stuff. I think that's been pretty big.
Every program talks about discipline. They talk about attention to details. Every football program in the country at every level talks about those things. The successful ones actually do it. And even if that doesn't mean you have to be Nick Saban. I mean, Pete Carroll was a player's coach, but if you watch Pete's teams play, they did it right? They didn't have guys just willy-nilly blowing assignments. I mean, you can't win games that way. Not a lot of them. It'll be interesting. The other thing that, when you're talking about the coaches and their vocal, their intense, why does that matter? It doesn't necessarily matter on day one. It doesn't matter on the first day of pads. But if you've ever done fall camp, high school, college, whatever, you realize that you get about 2-3 weeks into that, and you're bruised and you're tired and you're sore and you don't really want to be there very much. And if you don't have somebody insisting on excellence with every rep, you won't give excellence on every rep. And that means that you're going to waste a lot of the reps you have, and you only have so many to get ready for the season. So it is critical. We'll see whether or not the words result in different actions on Saturdays. We don't know that. Because I can promise you that if we went and listened to someone talk about UCLA practice, which I don't think anybody does these days, they'd be talking about some of the same things. The question is whether or not this staff can deliver. I suspect they can, but we'll know more in I don't know, week 4, I suspect. Eric, any other big picture thoughts you had on the first week of fall camp?
I mean, again, the size of the defensive line is something that we'll talk about probably, and it's individual guys, and it's just the fact that like there's so many of them where you kind of forget 2 or 3 are there, and then they show up, and the way they rotate in, I mean, it's just kind of guy after guy after guy, and I think so far you're hearing like the offensive line is not getting steamrolled, right? I mean, it's the pieces you heard from the coaches all off season. You know, we like what we have. Zach Hanson talked about it. I know who these guys are. Why didn't you go get, a veteran starting right tackle? Why didn't you go get more bodies? I know who I have. They can do it. It's all we'll see, right? It's all we'll see. Is the defensive line not as good as we think if they're, not running these guys over? Is the offensive line still like piecemeal, not quite as a whole? But I'm trying to talk myself into like not getting carried away early. Feels like the offensive line does have pieces that they're going to be able to put something together.
I don't know if it's this year's assistant coach, because you brought up the assistant coaching staff. This group of assistant coaches, I hate to use the term, there's a fear factor, but I think they're much more intense. When I watch Chad Savage working with the guys, going through the drills, when I watch Rob Ryan, if you have sensitive ears, just don't go to practice and be near his group, because as you said, sometimes cussing goes on, but it's that type of stuff. If they make a mistake, practice stops, and everybody kind of has to go through the discipline, whether it's push-ups, jumping jacks, whatever the case may be. Again, I don't want to say there's a fear factor, but the players understand this year there's consequences. There's going to be accountability. At least that's what I've seen, in the practices we've been able to attend.
One nice thing about having depth too, which I think USC has in a lot of these spots, we mentioned D-line, is if you have a lot of depth, you don't have to play a guy just because he's the only guy at that spot that has the physical tools. I mean, and USC's had that at a number of positions over the last 5 or 6 years, where a guy like Bear Alexander, Bear knew that they were going to play him. Now, he thought he should play more despite his lack of effort and preparation, but he knew he was going to play because they only had a couple of guys that were the right size and had some athleticism. So once you start to develop depth, especially along the defensive line and in the secondary and places where there are just a lot of good players, the guys who aren't willing to do things just right, the guys who aren't willing to give their all on every rep, those guys just don't play. And that's something that USC hasn't had in at least 10 years, I think. But I think they're developing now. Greg, the other thing with defensive linemen is you need a lot of defensive linemen, because defensive linemen have a hard time playing 100% if they have to play 80 plays, right? A free safety can play every play of the game. It doesn't matter. I played in the secondary. I could play every play of the game on defense. It didn't matter. I never once had to tap out. But if you're a defensive lineman, that's different. What is your perspective on the importance of having 2 or even 3 guys at a position that you can run in there consistently?
Well, my position is being in the Big Ten. They're going to come after you physically. Big, strong, fast. You can argue about skill players on any of these teams. Ohio State has all the, a lot of the great ones. Penn State's having a little bit of a run right now. But you need a bunch of defensive linemen, because the physicality of the game in that conference is such that if you just have a limited amount of players, it's going to show up in the second half. It's going to show up in the fourth quarter. And fatigue, brings out fear in players, and they don't think, they're trying to not mess up. It's just, it can be problems. But when you have a number of players, the players that are playing, one, they realize how challenging it is to play in this conference. And 2, they know that the coach that's coaching them is going to replace them. I think it was mentioned here about the fear factor of coaches. You know, Pete Carroll was a great example. You could really like Pete Carroll as a person and a way, but once the ball was down, you had a fear factor, but his assistant coaches, you had a fear factor. This idea that he's a player's coach sometimes gets wrongly interpreted like, well, he's a nice guy. He lets the players do whatever they want. No, that isn't the way it is because you have to train these players. You know, one of the things you have to remember is I think Eric talked about the helmet being, not in proper position. It's not what happens in these first couple of weeks of practice. What happens in the seventh week of the season if things aren't going as well? Is a player going to say, I don't care if my helmet's a little out of shape? I can tell you, I have coached with people, and when I was coaching, head coaching, you know what? Something as simple as I learned this when I was at Edison High School, and I took it when I was doing some other stuff. Players would always come to practice. When the whistle would blow, they would stand straight up, hands on hips, feet together, head looking forward. And they did it no matter what our record was. And that's one of the things I was proud of. And I learned when I was at Edison how coordinated you could be, that even in the seventh or eighth week, they're still doing it because it's part of what they do. And I think this whole idea, and that's why, okay, here comes an editorial comment. I don't like it when SC players wear different shoes or different this, it's a team. It's unified. Everyone does the same thing. If everyone's doing the same thing in the first part of a training camp, they should be doing it in the seventh week of the season. And if they are, generally things work out okay. Maybe it's not the best record, but there is such a thing as fighting on and doing what you're supposed to do. And you don't deviate from the things that are the little things. Little boats become big boats and they sink too.
Yeah, look, a football coach will get what he tolerates. And USC has had some football coaches recently who tolerated a whole lot of nonsense. And it showed because a lot of times a play is decided by the tiniest little things. Hand position, opening your hips too quickly, where your eyes are at the snap, right? I mean, all these tiny little things that make the difference between a 3rd and 10 and a touchdown. So you have to be good at insisting upon discipline and teaching it. The great coaches do it. I think USC has a great defensive staff, and I think we saw last year huge improvement in a defense that after the big injuries early on wasn't very talented for the most part, but did their jobs and played hard. But also struggled in the fourth quarter because if you're an undersized defensive lineman and you played 65 plays, that's a tough thing to do. So we'll see. Let's talk about some of the position groups and see whether or not, at least from the perspective of the outsiders who see a little bit of practice and know what the coaches are saying, whether there's something interesting going on. I want to start with the defensive line. Because I'm curious if we have any sense of what the rotation might be or where some of these guys are going to play. Is Devin Tompkins going to be a 3 technique? Is he going to be an end? Is Jakeem Stewart going to be a 3 technique? Is he going to be an end? Is Jaw Jarrett going to be a guy they expect to get 15 or 20 plays out of, and that's all they need? Do we know any of this stuff? And if not, let's make up guesses about just about all of it. Eric, go ahead.
I think early in so it's a different position, but Luke Hewitt, and maybe there's some coach speak in this too. He was asked about, my office starter, like how close are 2 and 3 and that sort of thing. And he said we don't worry about any type of depth chart at this point in fall camp. Like it's everybody gets better, everybody takes reps, and you've seen guys just take a bunch of reps, kind of rolling in, doing a bunch of different stuff. And so there isn't like at least kind of what we've seen, not these are the only guys who run with the 1s. These are the only guys who run with the 2s at this point. And the defensive line, I think you're getting to a point where you've got, can Devin Tompkins play 3 or end? Yes. Yes. And I think that Dantlin talked about that coming into fall, where he just said there's so much versatility we're kind of the point where we can do anything. Like we wanted to be able to get to a spot where we could call anything with any guy on the field, and that's kind of where you're getting. Again, Jakeem Stewart, same thing, could play three, could play end. You could do a lot of different things. I think at defensive end is probably, we've talked about how many guys they have along the defensive line. For the first time in a while, it feels like you are deep, deep on the interior, and you got guys on the edge. Nobody's complaining that you have Shelby and Cam Fountain and Anthony Lucas there, but it doesn't go super deep with pure defensive ends. And you've got a couple freshmen coming in where they're going to get every shot to be that kind of speed edge rusher to potentially make an impact this year. But I think on the defensive line, I think you're going to see a ton of rotation. And yeah, you're not going to get a guy where hey, we need 70 snaps out of you this game. No, we need 2-3 snaps in a row at 100%, and then we've got somebody else to go in there. And I think that's how you're going to see the defensive line go this year.
Depth chart probably matters a lot less on defensive line than other positions. If you lose the quarterback battle, you're probably not playing. If you're second string at nose guard, you're gonna be getting in the game a lot. So it probably matters less there. Offensive line usually isn't like that. On the offensive side of the ball, you try to have some cohesion, and so you're a lot less likely just to swap guys in and out willy-nilly. We have at least one major battle going on because we have a DJ Wingfield, who was supposed to be the starter at left guard, who is instead in Judge Selma's courtroom, seeing if a federal judge will let him play. In the meantime, we have a bunch of guys competing for that spot. Mark, the coaches have talked about this a little bit. Who is it we think is going to emerge at that left guard spot, and who are the guys that are in competition for it?
Well, I think if the game was being played tomorrow, Micah Banuelos is going to be your starting left guard, and he's holding his own. I mean, when you look at that offensive line, you got Elijah Page, who's 6'7". You've got on the other side Tobias Raymond, who is a legit 6'4", 6'5". I don't even know what his height is. You've got Alani Noah. I mean, Micah Banuelos is the smallest dude on that offensive line, especially if Jay-On-Ray Reed's at center. But when I say small, I'm not talking about, I'm talking height-wise. He's just as big and strong as the other guys. And I'm seeing a group that loves to battle. They are getting after it. They love to run block. So if we're looking at that offensive line right now, I think Micah Banuelos is going to be the starting left guard as of today. They're still working it out, seeing who fits where. But that might not be the only position. Without going into any details, they're taking a look at other guys. Coach Riley has talked about Kalon Miller, how he's come along. He might be one of the guys.
Let's talk about him a little bit, because this is not a guy who has been talked about a lot. He's not a guy who during the recruiting process was somebody we were always getting updates on, but we're hearing his name a lot. What do we know about Miller?
He just likes to play. He likes to fight. And I don't mean fight like this. He's competitive. And when you have somebody who doesn't understand how to lose in their own head, in other words, they're willing to do whatever it takes. Think of the Black Knight from Monty Python. Chop off a leg. Oh, I got another one. Chop off both arms. I'll kick.
It's a flesh wound. Just
exactly.
A flesh wound.
That's the type of attitude I think you're seeing from a lot of these guys, whether offensive line, defensive line. They're not looking at their role as I'm a backup. They're looking at it as like, that spot's mine. I'm going to take it. So it's going to be interesting to see how the offensive line kind of fleshes out as we go through fall camp, because of the whole DJ Wingfield situation, because Jay-On-Ray Reed has so much respect for Killian O'Connor that he's trying to do things his way to earn the starting center position. There's a lot going on right now. There's a lot of good young talent, and I don't think those guys want to wait anymore. So that's a good problem to have.
Eric Mark says they really like to run block. Boy, are they going to be disappointed. I'm kidding. Maybe I'm kidding. I actually don't know if I am. I'm at least half serious. Eric, who else have we been hearing about? I know Treater's been a guy who the coaches have mentioned a little bit. And so we have a lot of guys who haven't played much at all, who all seem to be in the mix there. Um, but as Mark puts it, maybe the guy who seems to be in the lead is a guy who, I don't know if undersized is right, because he's probably, 6'1", 6'2", 300 pounds. But in this day and age, on this USC football team, that's almost wide receiver size. What do we make of what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, you look at all the guards sort of in that battle, right? They've talked about Hayden Treater as being a guy, Makai Sina as being a guy, Banuelos being a guy, Caleb Miller as being a guy. Treater's the guy that is, oh, he's the guard, right? It's just size wise and how he fits in. Elijah Page is huge. Tobias Raymond is definitely bigger uh than what we've seen him before, but yeah, like Andre Reed is not huge. He's not Jonah Monheim size from last year. Banuelos is not big. Kalen Miller is not huge. So it would be interesting to talk, especially when you talk defensive line. Size. We want to be bigger offensive line, but it's also right. It's how you play. You can play big as an offensive lineman, even when you're little. If you talk about aggressiveness and leverage and all that kind of stuff, Banuelos is interesting because you're at a point now in college football where, oh, how long's he been here? He hasn't done anything yet. Time to go, right? Somebody else in, and Lincoln Riley's talked about a few times. It's just injuries have been tough. There's a few guys on that offensive line where you knew coming into fall where they just were saying we don't know a ton about this guy. He's been here for a bit, a year with Micah Banuelos, with Treater's a guy, with Sina's a guy. Like they have not been consistently healthy, and so to write them off felt premature until you got to really see them. And Riley talked about Banuelos being a guy where over the last like third of spring, it was the first real stretch where he got to play a lot. And so with guys, it's just can I play a lot? Can I get confidence? Can I get reps in? And then that kind of helps turn that light bulb on. And that seems like what's happened with Banuelos. And then with Caleb Miller, he goes back. He was a walk on. Zach Hansen was a guy that helped bring him in. And I'm trying to remember if Riley talked about him last fall. I think that's when we first started hearing a little bit. And then definitely this spring he got a mention. And then this offseason too, he got a couple where it's just, yeah, this guy just kind of keeps coming. And it's the way that they used to talk about Killian O'Connor too, where, all right, is some of that just like, hey, we want to give some love to the walk-ons and the work and push the scholarship guys because we're giving credit to there. And then Killian O'Connor's sitting at number 2 at center over and over and over when you keep thinking like, no, somebody's going to jump him. Somebody's going to jump him. And then in the bowl game, he's playing and doing fine and in discussion for playing time this year. Like I think Miller is that guy. Like I don't know if he ends up starting, but the way the coaches and teammates too have talked about him, you need depth at guard. I think he's doing a good job of putting himself in discussion in that depth chart, right? You need options at guard. You need 4 guys who can really play there. And I think you're trying to find that, especially because Wingfield, you know he's gonna be competent. Like he's taken enough snaps. You heard enough about him in the spring where he got there, fit in, understood the playbook, could run in that offense, but you need some other options behind him because you're still running on some pretty good injury luck from last year. And if you don't have it in your mind, like we need a few guys, right? You saw it in the bowl game right away. Right away, your left tackle goes down. That didn't really happen at all throughout the year. USC was one of the luckiest teams when you talk about injury with offensive linemen and how many snaps the starters took. So you better build depth. You're hearing same thing. Elijah Vicona is kind of the name that has bubbled up a little bit as that number 4 offensive tackle. Do you want to have to go 4 deep at tackle or at guard? Not really, but that's kind of what this is for, fall camp. Like, what did you learn in the spring? How quickly can you make an impact in the fall? can you give snaps this year if you have to? And that's a big thing for this fall camp. Can you find 7, 8, 9 offensive linemen in addition to who are your 5?
Vicona's an interesting one because he wasn't. I mean, he was recruited, and there were teams that wanted him, but he was not an elite recruit in terms of the list. But he's massive, right? Like shockingly big. He's bigger than John Jarrett looks small compared to Elijah Vicona. He's a big man who apparently has some pretty decent feet. If you have that kind of size and good feet, that's a pretty good starting point for a tackle. So I'm fascinated to see what kind of jump he makes. It seems like it's about 2 years too early, but we're hearing a lot about it.
But Riley pointed to him, right, as hey, when he talked about him and Floyd Boucard on the other side, yeah, those are guys we thought could potentially help early. And the size is clearly a thing, right? When Tobias Raymond comes in, he, not rail thin, but too thin. Like Aaron Dunn is one of those, he's a highly ranked guy, but you see him, Elijah Newby last year, like, oh, that's thin to make an impact as a true freshman. Like the talent is there, but I mean, good size is so helpful to play early as a freshman.
And those are the two guys who have really caught everyone's attention. I mean, you cannot bull rush Elijah Vicona. Just don't, because once he locks you up, the play is over. You have to have the speed and the technique to get around him or, stunt and get inside of him somehow. Floyd Boucard had 1 rep during practice earlier. The entire practice field let out one of those collective OMG sounds. When Coach Haney talks about NFL elite feet, it was on full display. The person he was going up against was lunging at air, made 0 contact. So this is the type of talent that USC has in the system right now, young talent.
Yeah, Boucard's also an interesting one because I really liked his film, and he's big, and he's from a place where they play good high school football. But for whatever reason, a lot of the recruiting services had him as a 3-star, and he's come in, and I mean, it's pretty clear that the coaches are enamored with him. Like they see this guy as a future first team All Big Ten player. I mean, that's the way they talk about him. So, and he's going to get some time this year because the defensive line, you're going to rotate. I don't know how much time Elijah Vicona will get because you usually don't just rotate in tackles, but defensive tackles you do. So we're going to see Boucard early, I would suspect. Let's flip to linebacker. Greg, there was talk in the spring about taking Elijah Newby, who is a fantastic athlete, and trying him on the edge to see whether you get a speed rusher out of him. Now he's listed on the roster as a linebacker. I'm not sure if we know what's going to happen with him yet. What do you think? What do you think Elijah Newby's role is going to be this year on this team?
I think that'll be decided by when he gets in the games, just what kind of production he provides. If he's able to make a difference out there, tackle or get to the quarterback, not breaking down on assignments, he's going to play. One of the players I always thought was an interesting example was when Matt Grudegood, the great USC All-America linebacker, I watched him for 3 years play all sorts of positions at Mater Dei, quarterback, safety, whatever. He was such a football player that he had to be on the field. And of course, when Pete Carroll came to USC, he saw what a lot of people saw. He's got to be on the field. You got to figure out a way to get him. And, if you saw him coming on the field in pads and stuff, you certainly wouldn't sit there and say, well, that's Lawrence Taylor-like. Okay. But once he started to play and the way he hit and everything, he established it's not the size of the dog, it's the bite. And let me tell you, Matt Grudegood showed you that if you're a great player and you produce on the field, and even in Matt's case, he was a very good practice player, obviously, you're going to play. So when you talk about a newbie, you go, is he so good that he just has to be out there? And how are we going to get him out there the most times because if he gets out there and he produces every time he's out there, he has to play.
Yeah, I hate to compare any young player to Matt Grudegood, but I mean, if you told me Matt Grudegood is the best high school football player from the state of California in the last 25 years, I might buy it. I mean, he was that good. He was that good. Matt Grudegood almost single-handedly destroyed that Long Beach Poly team that had, 5 top 100 recruits on it. He was unbelievable. Newbie though, Newbie has filled out. He's 230 something pounds. He can still run like a deer. He has all of the physical traits that you might want. And so I guess we'll see. They're not tackling. They're not in full pads. They're not taking people to the ground. I don't know how much of that we're going to see. And with linebackers, that's almost all that matters. But it seems that with a lack of depth they have at linebacker, it would be a surprise not to see Newbie get some opportunities earlier in the year to prove that he can go. Am I right about this, Eric?
Yeah, no, I think I don't want to call him like a gadget player because that sort of implies like he couldn't just play a spot. But I do think that Denton Lynn could pick and choose sort of this year where to how to best utilize him, right? He can rush the passer, you can put him on the edge, he can drop back in space, he could do different things for you. And again, when you talk about the depth that they have and Tamir Robinson being added to the linebacker group is big, Jaden Walker taking a step forward. So maybe you do with Desmond Stevens and Eric Gentry have a good group of two deep guys at those two inside spots. You can do more with Newbie, right? You can bring him in as a defensive end. You could put him out there as just kind of a traditional linebacker. You can go 3 linebackers and put him out there. So I think that is potentially his spot this year. And Greg's right, where it's, you if you're going to utilize him as a pass rusher, I think if you're going to utilize anyone as a pass rusher this year because of some of the options there, like your hit rate has got to be pretty good. Last year there were just a ton of pass rushes where you kind of ran into a guy and then didn't have any kind of secondary, couldn't get around and to the quarterback. They're gonna find guys this year, I think earlier in the year, where we got to get home. We got to get home. And so if you're not, then there's other options to go to. And I'm interested to see how productive he can be because I think there's a handful of guys on this defense that are just able to get to the ball. Able to get to the ball. I think he's one of them.
Yeah, he's an interesting piece. Tamir Robinson is. I mean, he didn't play a ton at Penn State, but he played some. He certainly looks the part. He's a guy, if you're going to go with the more traditional 4-3 set against some of these bigger running teams, you feel like you can put him out there and get the size out there. But we know so little about this. We know who the two, no doubt about that right now. The question, though, is going to be who else in that room gets on the field, and when they get on the field, are they going to make so many plays that you can't take them off? Are they going to make so many plays that you're running a lot less nickel than you used to run in the past? I don't think we know any of that yet. But Greg, let's talk about the secondary. I think everybody knows who the starting safeties are going to be. And I mean, Kamari Ramsey is going to start and be very, very good. I think Bishop is going to be a starter there. After that, I do think there is at least a little bit of question mark. I mean, Urlacher from Notre Dame certainly looks like a football player. I don't know if he runs the way you want a safety to run. But Greg, to my eyes, when you watch his highlights, when you listen to him talk, he seems like the kind of guy who you're going to have to get on the field at some point.
Yeah, I had like all the writers did, the good fortune of being at the media day, and he was there. And the first thing you think, you kind of close your eyes and you visualize his father playing, and what an incredible football player his father was. He's not overly impressive physically looking. When I say overly impressive, he's not 6'3", 225. He's not Taylor Mays, any of that type of body, but he talks like you would expect the son of a NFL player to talk. They just see the game at a professional level. Uh, you know, if anyone knows what he's all about, I would say that people that were at Notre Dame that are at USC now would know what he's all about and what he can do. And honestly speaking, if he's a football player, he's going to find a way to play. You know, one of the things about early training camp is there's a lot of emphasis on how good we're going to be and how many good players we have, and fine, very good. But once the games really start, who can bring it from the practice field, so to speak, and actually do it in the game in front of thousands of people and television cameras? And it's like the people always complain about players that are shooting free throws in a big game, and oh, he can't hit it. He can't hit that free throw. He's getting paid millions of dollars to hit that free throw. I go, once you start into the games, then that's a whole different mentality than practice. Some guys are great practice players and they stink in games. And you could say, well, the opposite is true. But you really don't want to put a player that stinks in practice in a game, because you don't practice in the game. You play to win in the game. So my feeling is a guy like Urlacher is someone to keep an eye on. He's that type of player that we say he's a football player. He could get on the field and make a difference. We'll find out when they scrimmage. I think the scrimmage is August 15th. And hopefully, although we're not supposed to report on anything, which I understand, we'll be able to at least get an idea in our brains, just some of the things that he can do.
Greg's pulling out some Herm Edwards quotes too. I like that. Play to win the game. Okay, let's talk about the wide receiver group. I think it's we know who the starting two are. That's obvious. But I think we have a pretty good idea who number 3 is at this point too, don't we? Mark?
Your number 3 is probably going to be a battle between Zacharias Williams, Prince Strawn, and I'm going to throw Jaden Richardson's name into the mix. He's been kind of showing up the last couple practices I've been out there, so we'll see. But yeah, Mekhi, Jacoby, they're 1A, flip them. They're your top 2 wide receivers. Jacoby Lane has shown he's taken that next step in his maturation process. He's not doing a lot of work right now. I mean, if they played tomorrow, he would be on the field. He would be starting. But that next step he's taken is that player accountability. He's doing a lot of coaching. He's taken the freshman under his wing. Someone mentioned it earlier on the show about, opening up and catching passes. Jacoby is watching for that type of stuff. If he sees a freshman opening up the wrong way, cutting the route off, rounding it off, whatever, he's telling these guys, hey, don't do that. Or if they see you doing something well, he's going to be one of the first people to encourage you. But yeah, when you look at Zacharias Williams, he's got a physically mature body. Same thing with Prince Strawn. He's not small. He's got that same type of Jacoby Lane size that you can use. The USC is they're not hurting at the wide receiver spot. And somebody always emerges out of somewhere, whether it's going to be the transfers or maybe, one of the freshmen that came in. Who knows? There's guys there that can get the job done. I'm hoping, and somebody alluded to it earlier in the show. I think it was you, Chris, about maybe they'll run more. Is that the running backs and the tight ends are more involved in the offense, whether it's running the ball or catching the ball out of the backfield type of stuff.
Yeah, to finish up on the wideouts, I think that for a long time I've said I'm not worried about USC and wideouts. Every USC coach can find wideouts, and that held true right up until last year, at which point USC had 4 guys who all seemed to be uber talented, and other than Mekhi Lemon, none of them played consistently well, and some of them consistently disappeared. Weirdest thing. I don't expect a repeat of that. McKinney, Williams, the transfer from Utah, he's going to be the 3rd leading receiver in that receiver room, isn't he?
I like him. So he didn't get spring ball, and I always think that that's pretty big. And Lincoln Riley mentioned it with the freshman, where spring a lot of times gives you, hey, this is where you struggle in this offense or system or with these teammates or whatever, you can work on that all summer and then hit the ground going in fall. He's got sort of an abridged version of being able to do that. What stands out about him and talking to him at media day that was interesting is he's got running back background, running back mindset, and then hit a growth spurt in high school, moved out to wide receiver, but you can still see, I mean, watching him run through just, punt return drills at the open portion of practice. He's got wiggle for that size that you don't see a lot. And I go back to even before we saw him in person at all at this level, Kyle Whittingham saying like he could play running back, right? For Utah. And at that size to be able to do that, it's different. It's different than what any other USC receiver bring. I mean, you trust Mekhi Lemon. Hey, go get us some extra yards after the catch. But even Zacharias Williams is different than Mekhi there. And so yeah, I think that if he can figure out the offense, if he can be physical in the run game as a blocker, then we could see him a lot. I thought one of the more interesting things from that media day was Dennis Simmons talking about, he said there's some things we got to improve on, some things, and I asked him what specifically, and he went straight to we're gonna be better run blockers, better than what we were last year. And I think that was a lot of the mindset, the physical, what it takes physically to be a dominant run blocker out on the edge. That seemed to leak over a lot to how physical can you be as a pass catcher out on the edge. And so that's where when you're talking about Zacharias Williams, when you're talking about Prince John, like, can you do both of those things at an elite level? I think that's where we just aren't going to know until the games start and they have to do it for real.
There were
Yeah, last year's wide receiver group was not a physical group, not trying to catch, not on 50-50 balls, not blocking. You had some guys, a couple who are gone now, who were unbelievably talented and sometimes didn't want to get their hands dirty, was my impression. I guess we'll see what they do at their new schools. Maybe I'm wrong about it. Mark, you were going to say something?
No, that was one of the things I mentioned Chad Savage earlier. They were working on pass blocking, run blocking yesterday at practice, and it was the attention to the detail, where your hand is placed on the shoulder, where you put your inside hand when you want to shed the guy, how to use the sideline as a teammate. All that stuff was part of the process, and the intensity behind it. That's what really caught my eye.
If we move to the tight end spot, I think we know who the top two are likely to be at this point. McCree is very experienced. Walker Lyons appears ready to take that next step. The big question, I don't know if we have an answer to it yet, is can they find a way to get Walter Matthews on the field? He's enormous. He's athletic. I think he should probably be a left tackle because he'd probably be a first-round pick if he made the transition. But look, if he wants to stay as a pass catcher and be a 285-pound pass catcher who can run, I'm okay with that too. Greg, what do we expect from Matthews, if anything, this year? He seems to have too much talent not to get on the field. It's a position USC hasn't got a ton of production from over the last few years. Is he going to jump in there and turn that group around this year, or are we still going to be talking next year at this time about how Walter Matthews would make a great left tackle?
That's an excellent question.
I ask a lot of them, Greg. That's really what I'm here for.
Well, you do a very good job, and you'll be the first one to tell us, I'm sure. The bottom line to it is that Walter Matthews, like so many players that I've seen come through USC, there's always, when is he getting on the field? He's got this and that. I mean, Walter Matthews, as you said, and I totally agree with it, that's a left tackle at the NFL level waiting to go. But we always have to remember that you may know better, I may know better, the fans may know better, but does Walter Matthews know better? Walter Matthews' brain might be, I'm a tight end, and I'm going to be a tight end no matter what. SC used to take tight ends during different segments of their history, and tight ends would get moved to tackle. It's not unusual. He's got all these physical attributes. I would say they're going to give him a shot. They have to give him a shot, right? He's so big and so talented, but is he going to be productive in a way that he's a difference maker? Especially as we know, let's not kid ourselves. SC's going to pass the ball. We know that. Okay, so how does he fit there? I'm sure they've seen things in practice that tell them something, but if they're gonna make a move with him, it would seem to me that they'll make a move with him in spring ball next year. They almost have to. And you know what's going to happen? And I think that we have to always pay attention to this. You ask most of these players what they want to do, and they'll say, "I want to get to the NFL." And you're not going to get to the NFL if you don't get on the field, generally speaking, to show what you can do in an actual game. And so you could be the greatest All-American that's never been heard of on SC, and people, potential is unproven talent. Walter Matthews has to get on the field, whether it's a tight end or a tackle. I mean, I could easily see Walter Matthews at some point being moved to tackle. And just as an example, they could move one of the SC tackles currently on the team to guard. And I'm not saying it's going to happen by any stretch of the imagination because you have to teach somebody, but if he's that physically talented and gifted and he has the mentality to go and dominate on the line of scrimmage, it might be a good thing for him to really consider if they're at that point.
I mean, look, he may be looking at the situation and saying, we haven't gotten a ton of production at tight end. Lake McCree is a veteran, and I think his veteran presence is going to do a lot of good in that room. Lake McCree is not a guy who's going to become an elite pass catcher this year. He doesn't have the physical tools to do it. Maybe Walker Lyons will. Mark Bowman's expected to, but he's not here yet. Matthews may be looking at the situation saying, yeah, you talk about left tackle, but Elijah Page is at left tackle. We have a bunch of other young guys that have been recruited to play tackle. I mean, why would I move out there when tight end appears to be wide open? Mark?
So before we put the cart too far ahead of the horse, let's remind ourselves he's a redshirt freshman. He was hurt last year. Can we give him a chance to play tight end? And look, can he he might have the prototypical size to play left tackle at the next level. Can he block? Does he have good feet laterally to move? Can he react quick enough? Those are things we have to take into consideration.
No, but if he can't do that stuff, he's not playing tight end either.
Well, I don't know. You can still play tight end. I think left tackle requires more blocking than playing tight end. Just a little.
I have no use for a 285-pound tight end who can't block. None, Mark. Don't try to sell me on that.
If he can get out of the open field, make a catch, and drag guys 4 or 5 yards after the catch, you'll.
I'll take that.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, Eric Armstead comes to mind, right? Like the mentality. I'm a defensive lineman. I'm a defense. No, you're a top 5 pick on the offensive line. Did fine for himself. As a defensive lineman. And if that's right, it's hard. It's really hard to convince someone that doesn't want to be convinced. And at that point, yeah, go be the best tight end. Go be the best tight end in the Big Ten.
There's plenty of time to make him the next Jacob Rogers. Let's see what he does this year, and then we can circle back and talk about Matthews. Is he?
There's also there's a ton of tight end snaps available. A ton. USC played a ton of 2 tight end last year. Lake McCree was like right there. So if you just look at snap count, there's the offensive lineman, there's quarterback, there's Woody Marks, and then it's like Kyron and Lake McCree. And Lake McCree missed 2 games with an injury. Lake McCree would have led pass catchers by a ton in snap count last year, and you still got Cade Eldridge is at like 230 snaps, and Walker Lyons is at 180. And Walker Lyons kind of got, slow into it and then a ton towards the end. So yeah, the top 3 tight ends, and especially if you don't need Lake McCree to take whatever that ends up being, 70% of the tight end snaps. Like if you can, dice those up a little bit more, there's a ton of time available for Walter Matthews to get on the field, for Walker Lyons to be a guy, for Joey Olsen to get into it. Like you've got some guys there you need an answer, right? You need an answer for someone who's going to threaten defenses, who's going to be a guy that can move the ball a little bit. Um, but yeah, I think there's a spot for him. And I mean, watching him line up like next to a tackle will be, you can throw it out there where you go six offensive linemen plus Walter Matthews on the at the end of a line, and it's like, oh, that's right. That's Iowa. That's Stanford. Like that's Big Ten football. Like if you can be that kind of team, because USC hasn't been thought of that kind of team for a while. So you can go in there and push people around a little bit.
Yeah, Jim Harbaugh and David Shaw were doing that for a long time at Stanford to great success, right? With extra tackles and big tight ends and look, college football is such a spread out game. You have so many guys at linebacker that have to play in space that you bring all the big guys out there, and that's not necessarily what defenses are comfortable dealing with anymore. Not even in the Big Ten. All right, let's take the last two position groups, glamour position groups, and I'm going to say right now we don't know anything from the first week of spring practice about either one of these groups because what a quarterback does in practice means almost nothing to me. We'll see what he does on 3rd and 5 with a man in his face when you have to get a first down. Until we see that, there's nothing worth talking about. And the truth is, at running back, I mean, you can tell if a guy can catch the ball and run routes. You can tell if he knows his blocking assignments. But what you really need out of a running back a lot of times is you need him to turn a hole that has a 3-yard gain into a 6-yard gain. And I don't know. I suspect they have guys on this roster who can do that. I'm pretty convinced. But you're not going to know that from thud drills without full gear on. You're just not going to know that. So
No, that's true. I mean, Jay, right? Jay, you like what you've heard about Jay, and even what you've seen a little bit just in being a vocal guy, checks in with all of his players, is kind of more rah-rah, more outspoken, and you've heard that from Lincoln Riley, from Luke Heward. Like he just feels more comfortable. And I go back to that situation he was in last year where it's Miller's team, it's Miller's team, it's Miller's team, it's Miller's team. Okay, Jaden, we need it to be your team now. That's a tough switch to flip right there at that point. So again, that doesn't speak to, is he throwing the ball backwards when he's taking a sack? Is he just launching the ball up to nobody? Like that's all stuff that, again, I think the first two games really from everybody, you're gonna get probably more a sense of, is it bad than is it really good? So yeah, go out, play clean. Then we'll start to get a sense of, is he picking the right windows? Is he forcing stuff? Is he making the same mistake over and over? But yeah, in terms of like, oh, is he throwing interceptions in practice or is he throwing a bunch of touchdowns? Like it's a different thing. So I'm with you on get the reps, be a leader, get some confidence, go out and play, and we'll see.
yeah, I mean, arguably the single most important question for USC football this year, we will not know anything about until probably the Illinois game, right? We probably won't. I mean, he may throw some great balls, he may throw some bad balls in those first 3 games, but even the Purdue game, Purdue doesn't have the talent to match up to USC. It's not close. What do you do against a top 20 team at their place? That's when we're going to learn something about Jade Mayama.
Again, I think we'll get an idea if it's bad, right? Offensive line, same thing. You're giving up pressure against Missouri State, again, like some of these teams. But yeah, the ceiling and how you play against great teams, that we won't totally know about for a while.
All right, let's talk about a team that's not a great team. It's the next opponent in line in our week-by-week preview. It's the Northwestern Wildcats, a fine academic institution from a great city. Guys, they're not going to be any good, are they? Does anybody want to argue that Northwestern is going to be good this year?
I think it is their turn in the rotation to be okay, right? They're always good when you think they're bad, and they're bad when you think they're good, and they sort of alternate year to year.
They're usually bad no matter what you think.
They're never great, right? That's like the ceiling is below great for sure. I mean, they went out and got a quarterback in Preston Stone, who lost his job, which is not always the greatest thing to have happened. But I mean, in the transfer portal, it would be the same thing as if USC had lost Elijah Page and Kamari Ramsey this offseason, right? Like their best players left. There's not a ton of talent in there. And I think the nice thing about this is you have to treat it. It's got to be like the Rutgers game, right? USC doesn't. Nobody wants to play Friday night games. The fans don't want to play it. I can't imagine the coaches love playing Friday night games. But if it gets you the extra day, right, to get ready for Iowa, and then you got Oregon coming too, that it just has to be one of those matter of fact, put it together, get out to a big lead, roll some backups out there, take care of it early. And now it's 2 years in a row where the schedule is set up where if you go through the conference schedule of who you're playing at home, okay, that's the Friday night game. We'll be fine with that.
Yeah, look, and I know what people who are listening to this are saying. I can already see them typing their comments. USC couldn't win a Big Ten road game all last year. You can't sleep on anybody. Look, I know all that, but my position is very simple. If USC is in a position this year where they can't beat a lousy Northwestern team on the road just because it's a road game, there's no point in listening to this show anymore. There's just not. I mean, if that's the state of the program 2 years in a row, then I don't know what we're doing here. So I simply refuse to accept that. Northwestern has no look, they're a Big Ten team. They have scholarships to give. They have some good players. Their two defensive ends are supposed to be pretty good. I do think the quarterback transfer, he showed some stuff at SMU. He's probably a good player. I mean, they're going to have some guys who can play, and Northwestern teams oftentimes are disciplined and gritty and all that. Whatever. It's not a good football game, and it won't be a good football game unless USC is in free fall at that point in the season. That's my guess. Although I say that remembering that Ohio State almost lost at Northwestern recently, so I guess you never do know.
Look, Northwestern in 2025 is building and playing for 2026 when they get to open their new stadium. They're not going to be a good team this year. I think we can all agree on that. Will they be competitive? Will they put up a good fight? Sure. If USC doesn't beat them at home in LA on a Friday night by 3+ touchdowns, USC did something wrong. Period. I mean, Northwestern is not a good team this year. They should do to the Wildcats in LA on a Friday night what they did to Rutgers on a Friday night. It's that type of competition.
We could have a fantastic competition against Rutgers in terms of journalism schools or something like that, but not football. So let's stop talking about Northwestern. Greg, do you have anything to say about Northwestern before we move on? Do you want to talk about the 1995 Northwestern squad? You called the Rose Bowl game, or you're the PA announcer. So if you want to talk about the old days of Keyshawn Johnson going for 230 against them, I'm all ears.
Well, you know what I liked about Northwestern? They were so excited to be there, and their fans were so excited to be there. And the press box had a lot of celebrities there from the motion picture world, and everybody was happy. And I tell you what, that was a pretty good Northwestern team. They competed against USC. Autry, the running back, was pretty darn good, and they fought on. They weren't any quitting them. And I think there was that one point where you say, well, I guess SC's got them where they want them. But that wasn't the case. The thing about schools like Northwestern, even Stanford, both of them are really great academic schools. These kids that play at these schools, they don't generally take a dive. They have a work ethic about them that says we play to the end, to the whistle. And that really tests schools that are like, oh, we're playing Northwestern. Okay, chalk it up. We're going to kill them. When that Northwestern team comes into the Coliseum, they're going to come to play hard. And I'll tell you what, even the Trojans opener, okay, they're going against that Missouri team. They're going to come to play hard. They may be outclassed. They may, this and that. But so much of sports and football specifically is about, are you up to play? And they're going to be up to play. One of the things that SC has to really understand, I think people that follow SC know this already, so it's nothing new. Look, at USC is still one of the great names in college football history. You can't deny it. The number of guys in the NFL, Heisman Trophy, everything. People are going to play because you're USC. Now, if you don't want to play like the USC team, then that's your problem, and it's going to come out to show it. I mean, even John McKay, as great a coach as he was, went through I think it was 2 6-4 seasons before all of a sudden in 1972 has one of the greatest college football teams of arguably of all time. And the point is, the really good coaches, they come back from it. This season is a big season for Lincoln Riley. If he wants to be thought of in the veins of the great USC coaches in the past, they really got to turn it around. I don't think that 8-4 is what a great turnaround that is. I think they got to be looking at double-digit wins. We could talk about this later, but bottom line is Northwestern. I always enjoy watching Northwestern play because I know they're going to play hard, and I think there are times when they actually are pretty competitive. So we'll see. Their offense was horrible last year. Their defense is not bad.
Yeah, Northwestern is one of those programs I almost always root for because whoever they're beating is usually a team that I dislike more than Northwestern. Vandy's kind of the same way. But they're not going to beat USC, the Coliseum. Let's stop. Neither is Missouri State, although I appreciate you pumping up that opener. I mean, the ticket office is very excited about that, Greg. But and Missouri State will no doubt be out of their minds fired up to play USC in the Coliseum for about 8 minutes. Okay, that's enough of that. Let's talk about some people who don't have any idea what they're doing. Let's talk about the coaches poll. Guys, USC is, I think, 4th on the others receiving votes. And that's fine. I don't agree with it, but that's fine. The coaches don't pay attention to other programs that they don't play. Like you could ask Lincoln Riley, how's Georgia going to be this year? And I'm guessing Lincoln Riley would tell you, I'm thinking they're probably going to be pretty good because they have a good coach and they recruit a lot of really good players. But I have no idea because I'm not paying attention to them, nor should he be, which is why the coaches send off somebody else who also doesn't pay attention to these other programs to cast their vote for them. The coaches poll is an abomination. So we can put that aside just for a second, unless you guys want to argue that the coaches poll is really cool. But here's the thing that bothers me about it. And it's more the AP poll than the coaches poll. And these days, the way the playoff is set up, it matters less. But people want to say preseason polls don't matter, but they do. Because if you start at 8 rather than 28 and you finish with the same record, you're still going to be ahead of the team that was at 28. That's just the way the pollsters work. And for everybody who's asking, well, why is the Big Ten making a big deal about the automatic qualifiers? That's why, people. The preseason polls are based on nothing other than what was the team's record last year, what's their reputation, and do I know their quarterback's name? That's what makes up a preseason poll. It's silly, but when you get to week 7, those preseason polls still matter because if you started at 7 and you lose, you fall to about 15. If you start at 25 and lose, you don't get back into the poll for 4 weeks. That's just the way it works. It's ridiculous. But that's it. So USC is not in the coaches poll. I suppose it doesn't matter in the sense that if USC goes 9-3, they have an outside shot at a playoff bid. If they go 10-2, they're going to be in. I mean, I think we all know that the playoff has sort of changed things a little bit, but does anybody want to stand up for preseason polls? Anybody want to stand up for the associate sports information director that actually casts the ballot? I mean, it's out there. People are arguing about it.
You're right. You're right. Like people want to say, oh, they don't matter, just win, just whatever, all this stuff. And it's like, that's great if you win your conference, right? And get a guaranteed spot. Or there's what you're saying, if you're guaranteed, if you're top 3, top 4 in your conference, and then you can go. But if you're playing for an at-large spot, which I know you don't go into the year going, oh, let's just shoot for an at-large spot. But it does better because they don't throw them away every week. Like I would love to see put a preseason poll out. That's great. But then week 1, I need it in order who had the best wins, right? Who had the best wins? Who has the best resume so far that year? But it doesn't happen. It's, oh yeah, that team lost, but I still think that they're better than this team that won, and so I'm gonna put a 0-1 team over a 1-0. Like that sort of stuff, it carries over with them as they do it. So it's always better to be thought of as being good going into the year, because at the end of the year, if I'm 10-2 and you're 10-2, just like you said, and I started at 4 and you started out of the polls, I'm ranked because people carry that across. Well, I thought coming into the year that they were going to be better. They're probably better, so I'm gonna take them instead. So it's USC's fine.
It's
They're fine. They have enough wins. They have enough potential big wins on their schedule. It's not crazy loaded, but you've got some games up there that they'll be just fine if they win the big games and they're as good as they think they're going to be, or they should be.
If,
it's it,
if SC beats Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, that will be the first sign that they'll get respect. But when you look at I mean, I look at the polls are great. I think they're probably good for recruiting, only because you can say we're the number 10 team in the country, we're number 5, and they can build upon that. But my feeling is that USC is going to play. I think I was looking at the coaches poll. It doesn't make any difference where they were ranked. They're just playing teams that are ranked in their schedule. And if they beat those teams, Notre Dame, you can say, oh, they're not going to beat Notre Dame. But if they do beat Notre Dame, they'll have enough wins in their schedule against teams that are ranked that they can make a legitimate case for whatever the case may be in terms of the playoffs. Win the Big Ten. You don't have to have much of an argument. You're in. So it'll be interesting.
If you're in the top 3 in the Big Ten, you're going to make the playoff. Whether you have automatic qualifying or not, you're going to be in. But and so it doesn't matter as much as it used to. But it matters. It matters because it's hard for anybody to rethink the poll every single week based on all the games that were played. Nobody does that. You have your poll and you move some teams around, you throw it in. That's the way it works. And that's not how Mark would do it. Mark, you'd do it the right way, wouldn't you?
So the right way, number one, is just eliminate the coaches poll altogether. As everyone has agreed that they're not watching these games. They're sending some assistant SID to go cast their vote for them. I mean, if it's not so much that USC isn't part of the top 25 preseason, but when you see teams that are ahead of them, why is Texas Tech number 24? What was so impressive about them last year that, we got to get the Red Raiders in there? Is it because they raided the transfer portal? They brought in David Bailey and Quentin Joyner. Is that put them over the top? Why in the hell is Michigan at number 14? Just none of this makes any sense.
I think the helmets. But this is a problem though, right? Because you say, well, Michigan's 14 because of the helmets. Well, we have helmets too. They're famous.
Why is Florida at number 17 when these coaches knew DJ Lagway, where they pin all their hopes and prayers on, their starting quarterback? He's hurt right now. Billy Napier is still that head coach. Why are they 17?
Because it's the only position group that these voters pay attention to. They all know who DJ Lagway is.
But he's not even playing right now. He's hurt.
No. I assume he's going to at some point, and he'll probably be good when he does. Whether he's good enough to get them in contention, I'm skeptical. But look, here's the thing. I probably have a better sense of some of these teams than the coaches when they don't play them. And that makes sense because they're focused on their own team and their own conference and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But nobody knows the other teams the way they know their own team. And so you have two sets of fans. The bulk of fans overestimate their team all the time, right? Their players are great. Nobody knows how great we're going to be. You have another group of fans, at least as vocal, who recognize the holes in their team and don't realize that every other team in the country also has holes. But the idea that anybody knows the top 50 programs and really knows a lot about they just don't. None of them. None of the college football writers know that. You can't.
I think Lane Kiffin showed how serious they are about the coaches poll. I mean, remember when he was voting, who he put in number 1 year? It's like, are you being serious, coach? Why are you doing this? You're making a mockery of this.
So Michigan is there. Michigan ended last year. They beat Ohio State at Ohio State. Then they beat Alabama in the bowl game. And bowl games are not the same as what they used to be, right? Nobody's on the field anymore. Everybody's transferred, whatever. But they bring back some talent, and they finished with that. If USC had beat Notre Dame, if they had beat Notre Dame at that game and then went and beat Texas A&M or whatever bowl game they would have gone to and won that game, and Maiava's coming back after that finish, I think there's a huge difference in the conversation around USC. But what people saw was that ending to the Notre Dame game, and then 3 more picks against Texas A&M, and that's where USC is right now. And I know Michigan doesn't have a quarterback coming back, but to end the season with those 2 wins is different than how USC ended the season.
All right,
There's
well,
no doubt
I'll
about
put those
that.
up against USC going 2-0 against the SEC. I mean,
Well,
what's the
look,
argument?
beating Ohio State in a year that Ohio State wins a national championship, that's a pretty good feather in your cap, right? Despite the fact that it's a rivalry game and weird things happen in rivalry games, that's still a big deal. Beating last year's Alabama team is beating a team with a famous helmet that just wasn't very good. I watched that Alabama team shortly before that bowl game almost get shut out in Norman by what, a 6-win OU team? That was a garbage Alabama team. But you're right, they beat them. We'll see. I mean, Michigan, I think is probably a little overrated, but I still think Michigan's going to play good defense. And if their freshman quarterback can do something, maybe they'll be okay offensively. I don't
And
think
it's
they
great
will
for
be-
USC. I wanted Illinois and Michigan to be 1 and 2 in the polls.
I certainly want both teams to win those. I mean, Illinois has Indiana early. Michigan also has a big early game. Is it Texas? No. Who do they have early?
Ohio State.
Your
and Texas.
team, Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. Yeah. So look, I want both those teams to win early. If USC wins both those games, they're set up very nicely, even if they stumble on the road a couple times. All right. That's enough talk about the Coaches Bowl. The Coaches Bowl's silly. Guys, is there anything else we should be talking about before we sign off?
We previewed Brett Kolejay, and he committed to USC. That's there was so much recruiting. There's a guy Monday, there's a guy Tuesday, there's a guy Thursday, there's a guy I mean, they put this class together so well to be going into the season basically at this point in a spot where you could say, yeah, if nobody jumps up and we need them, then we're fine. We'll keep the class as is. Like that's crazy. That's crazy.
And
That's,
it's
how
built
Mac
around-
Brown used to do it at Texas, and you didn't think that you could do that anymore just with what we've seen the last, I don't know, what, 20 years or something, with guys jumping out of classes and decommitting and doing all that stuff. And there's still the we'll see, but it doesn't feel like it's as, like nervous time as it's been in the past. Like just an unbelievable job of putting this class together. There's no holes. There's a couple spots where, hey, if there's another linebacker that jumps up, if there's a safety, maybe some of those things. But I mean, the offensive line, the defensive line, where you build programs, I mean, those are a lot of pieces coming in that 26 class.
Yeah, that's right. And if you combine the last 2 classes, when you look at offensive linemen and defensive linemen, you're talking about a program that's being built the right way. USC has had high-ranked recruiting classes in the past where they have a lot of flashy athletes and don't have the depth at the line positions they need. That's not the case now. And if USC is playing really well in the trenches, SC is going to be all right. They're never going to have trouble finding quarterbacks or wide receivers and corners. USC is not going to struggle to find those things. You have to be strong in the trenches, and they have put back-to-back classes that are excellent on both sides of the ball in the trenches. So that's a nice thing. I like that. Okay, I guess that's it. We're done for the week. Hopefully we'll know a little bit more about USC through fall camp over the next week. They're going to put pads on and things will happen. Hopefully they will stay healthy, because when the pads come on, that's when things start to fall apart. So let's hope that doesn't. All right. Any words of wisdom, guys?
Yes, listen to Chris and I when it comes to the USC versus Notre Dame series. We were always right. We were never wrong.
Fair.
So if you're not sure where that's coming from, get on over to the WeAreSC.com message board and you'll fully understand.
Yeah, Mark is right. He and I are 100% correct on that issue. Okay, I guess we're done. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. Until then, fight on, everybody.